If you've ever wanted to know how to do what's hardest, then stay tuned, because in this video, I'm going to explain how to do it. What are the hardest things you have to do this week? Is it to start a new project? Or maybe to finish one? Is it to make a difficult phone call? Is it to make a challenging decision? It may surprise you, however, when I tell you that you already know how to do the things that are hardest for you. You just haven't realized it. You see, it's a question of timing, and that's not something that most people think about when they have to do something that's hard for them. Instead, they think about putting it off, but not when they'll actually do it. The thing is that the harder it is, the longer they'll put it off. In fact, they'll keep on postponing it in the hope that they won't have to do it at all. And if you keep putting off anything, including the things that are hardest, then they'll never get done. Whatever you have to do will still be hard, no matter when you do it. It may be the hardest thing you ever do, but here's the thing. If you never do it, then you'll never find out if you could. You'll be left wondering. Regrets can start like that. There's something else. The longer you put off anything that's hard, the bigger in your mind it will get. It will seem harder tomorrow than it does today, and next week it will be harder still. The question then is, how do you do what's hardest? And the answer is, and this is really important, I don't want you to brush this off. The answer is that you do the hardest things when they're the easiest. There's a time when it'll be easier than at any other time, and that's the time when you should do the hardest things. But that's not what most people do, and it's not what you're inclined to do either. Not only do you postpone things, but when you finally do get around to doing them, you usually do it at the worst possible time, the time when it's harder than it needs to be. You see, the time that's easiest for you is not when you've reached the end of your rope, or when you're tired, or when you've been under a lot of stress. The easiest time to do anything that's really hard is when you're the most rested, and when your mind is at its clearest. For most people, that will be before lunch. If you have anything like the typical American lunch, then you'll feel sluggish afterwards, and your energy will continue to drain away for the rest of the day. So you should aim to do the hardest things you have to do in the morning. If other people are involved, then they'll probably feel better at that time too. But there's more to how to do what's hardest than how rested you feel. That's because the demands of the day also take a toll on you mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. That's why in the morning, your mind will be fresh and less cluttered than it is later in the day. And there's another thing. It's what scientists call your circadian rhythm or body clock. Most people who work day jobs begin to flag by mid-afternoon. Steve Jobs famously wore the same outfit every day so that what to wear would be one less decision that he had to make. Roy Baumeister and John Tierney, in their book Willpower, refer to this tiredness as decision fatigue. They describe a study in which more than 1,000 parole decisions were made over a 10-month period. The judges who sat on the parole boards took turns in order to minimize bias. Of the prisoners who appeared before their boards early in the morning, 70% were paroled. Of those who appeared just after lunch, 60% were paroled. At any other time, the number paroled was substantially less. Now you may think that the high number of parolees after lunch contradicts what I just said about aiming for the morning and avoiding the afternoon. But that's not the case, not entirely. You see, decision fatigue not only comes from making a lot of decisions, but also from hunger. And the judges who saw prisoners just after lunch were well fed, so their brains had the glucose they needed to avoid decision fatigue. If you try to do what's hardest later in the day, then you won't be as sharp as you would be in the morning. The tendency, however, is to do the hardest things after you've cleared your desk of the important things when you're tired. In other words, you're trying to do the thing that requires the most energy when you have the least. The easiest time for you to do the hardest thing is before you do everything else. It's also worth noting that there's more daylight in the morning. The blue light that comes from the sun will have an effect on how awake you feel. Even cloudy days in the morning are brighter because the sun is higher and rising, whereas in the afternoon, it's starting to set. It's past its apex. You're at your best in the morning before you do anything else. And now that you know that, you also know when it'll be the easiest to do the hardest things. Plan ahead. Figure out what your hardest tasks will be, and then plan to do them when you're at your best physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. You'll get far more done and make better decisions in much less time if you do. And speaking of time, be sure to watch my video about how to use procrastination to get your work done. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Have a great day. I'm Dr. Bruce Hoag.